I think the best way to kind of introduce this is, brother, we are, in the same struggle, have the same consciousness and spirit about where we are. We are both educators at heart, and we also both understand the importance of educating and learning outside of the class because with the things we're dealing with now, brother, it takes a lot more than just going to class every day or signing up for a college course or just reading the book. We're talking about application steps, man. And for the people who aren't familiar with me, I'm Mr. Ernest Crim III. Look at myself as a public teacher above all, a person who uses Black history and overlooked histories in general from a liberatory perspective. Because if we don't know who we are and where we came from, then we don't know where we're going. And there's a very particular reason, y'all, why those in power keep trying to censor our histories because it's something I've been saying recently is nobody who's taken public or private history school, like I mean, nobody in a public or private school setting is taking a history class. You're taking marketing of the empire. That's essentially what you get. Marketing of the empire to how to sustain this or how to help it continue to grow. So we come in here to try to give people that balance and to fight against that. So before we continue though, brother, I want you to kind of introduce yourself, man, and let us know who who you are and how you would describe yourself to anybody coming across your stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. And I don't remember exactly when I found your page and your content, but I remember I was starting out making educational content and seeing you break down these different moments throughout history, talking about those dark parts that, like you said, we don't usually get to hear about in school. That really inspired me. So, I'm honored to be here on this conversation with you. So, a little bit about myself. My family came from Jalisco, Mexico. So, my mom came here as an undocumented immigrant when she was 7 years old. She had me and my brothers when she was in her early 20s. And she raised us as a single mom. My dad ended up going back to Mexico, getting deported, and they split up from there. And so I grew up in Orange County, California, SoCal, just kind of going through the motions, going to school because I had to, not because I loved it, not because they told me this is your ticket to this or that, but just I got to go to school. My mom's got to go to work. And it wasn't until around, I'd say, my high school time and transitioning into college where I really started to understand the value that education has in helping us to understand the world that we're living in. Because, in elementary school, you're learning how to read, write, math, going through those just motions. Middle school, it's more about like identity, trying to figure out who you are, building relationships. And then high school, it's where am I going to go? What am I going to do with my life? Right. And so I started taking classes on like psychology in college and sociology, political theory, political science. And I remember early on too, like when I was in high school, I was dipping my toes into the political conversations on like CNN and MSNBC, watching the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, just learning a little bit about what politics looks like and what these people in positions of power are really doing. When I was in college, I had my son at 22 years old. So my son was born when I was 22, and I think that also served as a catalyst for me because it's one thing to try to figure out what you want to do with life. It's another thing to know that you are responsible for this other human being and trying to help them to be prepared to navigate this world that they're walking into. And I feel like that was a time where I was really starting to think about what do I wish I had known when I was younger that somebody could have taught me, and how can I be that for my son? How can I be that educator, that mentor, that guide for my son? I graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a BA in psychology a year after my son was born. And following that, I got a multiple subject teaching credential. So I had been working in schools as an after school instructor, as a special needs student support paraprofessional, helping out in special needs classrooms. And I just felt like at home in the education space. I loved talking to students and, again, being that person I needed when I was younger. And so I felt like the classroom was where I belonged, right? So I got my multiple subject teaching credential, got a job right away teaching world history, teaching English. And I would also have classes like secondary classes. I was teaching social emotional learning classes, media classes where I was showing kids how to do interviews and make podcasts and things like that. And that was another catalyst, again, because if it's my son that I'm looking out for, now I got this legion of students that I see every year, and I have to help guide them in not just their educational journey, but on their personal journeys as well. And so that really led me into just digging into history and politics in a deeper way. And around I'd say like 2019, 2020, I fell into the world of social media through Instagram. I was on like Facebook before that, but Facebook was mostly just talking to my friends and family about this and that.
Right.
Instagram was where I was like, "Okay, I care about this thing and I need people to know about it. So how can I make some, content to help people to help shine a light on this?" And so some of the earlier things that I was talking about was, like, the Bernie Sanders campaign, because
Mhm.
I was a big Bernie bro in 2016 and in 2020. Sunrise Movement, which talks about climate change and fighting for what they call the Green New Deal. That was something else that I was, really passionate about. 2020, during the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a lot of activity in Orange County where I was living, and so I would go out there with my camera and just take pictures and video to document, like, you're gonna see burning cop cars on the TV and people breaking into Target. That's not the reality of what this
Mhm.
movement is about. And so I wanted to showcase the full picture. COVID, that was another just situation where we're trying to educate people, talking about mutual aid efforts that were happening. And yeah, man, it's just been from there on, there's all these issues that come up where I feel like I've had the privilege to learn about the broader context on why this matters, why we should give a shit. Can we cuss on here? I
Yeah,
should add.
yeah.
Yeah. So from that point on, I've just learned about so many more things and wanting to digest that for people as an educator to try to help them to understand why this matters. In 2022, I met my partner Leslie Priscilla. She's the founder of an organization called Latinx Parenting. And essentially, what we talk about there is how to help guide families on the journey of healing from intergenerational trauma. Because after centuries of colonization that has impacted the Latin American communities, there's a lot that we need to unpack. And if you don't understand that history, if you don't understand that context, if you don't know what trauma is and how that shows up in our families, then you're kind of just operating with these wounds that you're not even conscious of
Mm,
and perpetuating some of those same harmful patterns, right? So that's what I've been really invested in since 2022, helping my partner to build out that programming, talking about all these different issues. 2023 and 2024, we were heavily invested in the Palestinian liberation movement here on the ground and talking about things on social media that, again, if you live here in the US, like you said, there's narratives that are not shared with you. There's certain stories that are presented as, oh, this is a holy war that's thousands of years old and they're just fighting because that's what they do. No, no, no. There's a lot more to it, right?
yeah.
So I think in a nutshell, that's kind of what led me to where I'm at today.
No, no, it's brother, it's narrative warfare is what we are constantly dealing with and experiencing. So I wanna, go back a little bit though, because I'm always interested in what was that moment or what were the moments that made you say, like, I have to get engaged in this as an educator because, this is not something that is promoted to us as young men of color as a viable career. When
Mhm.
you think about the amount of children we have in school versus the percentage of us actually in the class. So, like, was it your parents? Was it somebody in your community? Was it like an educator? How did that happen?
Dang, I feel like I haven't given enough reflection on that specific question, but if I had to say, like, what was it? I think honestly, when I was younger, I was very insecure. I was, kind of a lonely kid. I had a lot of, friends in elementary school and middle school, but I never felt like I had a place, right? And I always felt like I was just trying to shape myself into whatever I needed to shape myself so I could fit in here. And I feel like there was a little bit of that of me wanting to step into a role where I can help guide a younger version of myself to become a more full and authentic version of myself, right?
Mhm,
So if I couldn't do that for me, how can I show up for other students? I think another thing I want to mention, I my first job ever was a bag boy at Stater Brothers.
mhm,
So I was just bagging groceries, pushing the carts, and it was fine. It was a good job. I had a lot of good moments there, but I knew that I was not comfortable in a customer service setting. I
mm.
felt, where's your name tag at? Did straighten out your tie? Oh,
Yeah.
you're 2 minutes late. I'm like,
Yeah,
and so
playing that role all day, right? You gotta smile for the customer and, just put I mean, for 8, maybe more hours a day, right?
Yeah, and, uh, it was I did it for about 2.5 years,
Mm,
while I was going to school, and it was fine, it was, first job, paid the bills, helped me get a car, all that, but I knew I was like, "This is not for me," and so then I had that moment where I was reflecting on what do I actually want to do? If I could choose. And I remember being in middle school and being in the Boys and Girls Club, the after school program, and I had a lot of great memories with the mentors there. Like they taught me how to play sports, they taught me how to create arts and just build those relationships. And again, I was like, I'd like to be that for somebody else. So I
mhm,
feel like that's what pushed me into that path. But then as I got older, I'm thinking about like the conversations that we have, digging into like those difficult moments in history, the working class revolutionary stories that you don't talk about. That was another aspect where when I started learning about those things, when I started learning about not just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and the civil rights movement, but about Assata Shakur, about the Black Panther Party, about listening to Malcolm X and Kwame Ture speeches, I was like, this is powerful. And the fact that I didn't know this when I was in high school or in college, and I had to learn about it on my own through YouTube University and all these online spaces. Uh, how how much of an impact would it have been on the people around me if we had that information, that knowledge at our disposals way back then, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like that was another impetus for me where I was like, I need people to know this stuff so that we can all get free in a much faster pace.
Can you speak to how that lack of information of our more radical history or just even depth added to people like a King or Rosa Parks, how that plays a role, man, in what we see today? Because I think that's probably a big reason why both of us have decided different parts of the country both decided to delve deep, because it comes to a point where you learn about, the I would say the fave five of black people is
Mhm.
like King, is Rosa, Frederick, Harriet, and X. And we know like they're not all portrayed in a positive light. And we know we're only given really surface information about them. But like, how did you come to understand that lack of information we got about them and other people was serving this empire?
Dang, I'm trying to remember. I feel like 2020 was really a big moment for a lot of people in unpacking that because before that, I was very much on the sort of like progressive Democrat
Mhm.
line, right? Like I was fighting for things like I was advocating for things like higher minimum wage and tuition-free colleges and universities and things like that. But I didn't have necessarily the historical context of how we all got to where we are.
Mm,
When I started to learn about, I think in 2020, again, with the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of conversations around systemic inequality, about critical race theory that got turned into this boogeyman, right?
yeah,
Uh, and learning about the ways that this country had, like, there's this idea that things were unfair, but it's just because we made all these mistakes. And if we hadn't made all those mistakes, then we would be great. And so all we have to do is just keep learning from those mistakes. And I was like, no, that's not actually the story. The foundations of this country were not a mistake. They were intentional. They didn't kill the Native Americans and steal their land on accident. They didn't trip and fall into that. They didn't enslave all these people from Africa on accident. There was a system behind that. There was a motivation behind that, and it was institutionalized.
yeah,
And it was only because of the resistance of people in the indigenous community, in the Black community, that these injustices, these horrible human crimes against humanity were undone. And
yeah.
so if you start there and then you keep going, right? Okay,
And
that was the oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, too, as well, to kind of just continue what you were saying, it's like if you start from the framework of understanding that everything you learned was likely a lie in school, okay? If you just start from that standpoint, then it becomes easier for you to grapple with the reality of
Mhm,
relearning things as an adult. And you don't take it personal because one of the things I would notice when I started creating content, it was like this idea of a lot of people engaged with it because they were frustrated that they did not learn it. So there was, I can't believe my teacher did teach this. I can't believe, and I'm more at this point. I'm more concerned not with the omission of certain facts because as you know, it's hard to cover everything. I'm more so concerned with the narrative and the framework used to give that information. And once you start to think like, okay, they're teaching me about like you just dissect all these myths that
mm,
we commonly have, whether you are in Southern California, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Miami, Texas, like we can all relate to some of these same things, having not met each other before social media was ubiquitous. And you start to realize that if we come with the understanding that everything we learned in school, like I said at the beginning, was to allow us psychologically to believe that this creation of a country, the settler colonial state, should continue and is just the way it is, then it all makes sense. And then you're going to probably go through a period in your life where you're going to be really angry and frustrated with why you were lied to and why so many things were omitted. I remember in college, man, when I first started taking Black history courses, bro, and I think the collision course for me was not just taking the course, but it was living the reality of why the course was needed. Because I'll take a Black History course and then there's a blackface party, or there's somebody calling me an N-word on campus, right? And then you start to see the Black frats and sororities have homes off campus that don't look like castles like the white frats and sororities. And you start to say, that feels like my old neighborhood, right? So that, and I think that's the difference too between learning these things in community, because when you learn it in community, you're able to not only just converse about what's happening, but then you are able to kind of live it as opposed to reading it in a silo. So, and I think when people are listening, it's important too for people to we have to reframe how we even talk about this country. When we say the United States of America, we refer to it as American. I think, even Bad Bunny made a great exhibited that well when we talk about America, because we centralize. It's not just Eurocentrism. If you are in America, a resident, a citizen, whatever, you come to learn that you are the center of the world. In between Canada and Mexico and everything else, it's you. You're the earth. The sun
Mhm.
revolves around you. So you say America, you're like, you ain't even thinking about North America, South America. You ain't thinking about all the other people. You ain't even thinking about the fact that this place ain't America, right? Even if we gonna go, if we gonna come from the understanding of like who names these things, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
what is the common understanding of why we even call this thing that thing, and why some indigenous tribes may have referred to it as Turtle Island, but we can't say they all did because they weren't of the understanding of you could own this land. Like all of that has to be unlearned. And I think one of the most
Yeah.
difficult things is you try to unlearn it while you are also actively, because of your position, no choice of your own, having to some in some ways participate. We didn't choose it. Like I didn't choose to be, to be here.
Mhm.
I'm born in the '80s, and then I wake up when I'm in my late teens, and I'm like, yo, some ain't right here.
Yeah.
So you said that you went through this like this evolution politically too, in terms of how you were organizing in the 2020s and things like that, and where you are now. What were some of the things that kind of, well, first, what made you even want to go further left, right? Because like you're thinking about the duopoly we have in this country, the Democrats, Republicans, and how we think that's the only thing we have here. It's left, it's right, it's conservative, it's liberal, all of these different labels we get. But what made you say like we got to do a little bit more than just look through those two lenses?
Mhm. I think something that, I often mention is, like, something that allowed me to be able to have those kinds of explorations. When I was growing up, my mom didn't really have a filter on what we watched. She was working all day, and we'd come home, and whatever's on the TV, we get to choose whatever movies we wanna watch, whatever's on the internet, and, there's positives and negatives to that, right? We see a lot of things that were definitely not age appropriate for our age, but I remember also, like, I had uncles that would introduce me to, stand-up comedy. And so they were so and, it's not just like the, ha chuckle hut type jokes, it's George Carlin, it's, Richard Pryor, Bill Hicks, early Chris Rock and early Dave Chappelle, where they're really picking apart this system that we're living under and showing the hypocrisy of it, showing the absurdity of it. So I feel like that helped me to, break away from that, conditioning that you have where the world is this way, right? You're trying to see the world in this way, where I was able to say like, now there's some flaws here when it comes to religion. There's some flaws here when it comes to our politics. There's flaws here when it comes to the inequality that we see in these different spaces. So I feel like that helped to open it up a little bit. But then also, as an educator, I feel like I was in a privileged position where when I was teaching, it was a 2-hour commute for me every day. And so I had an hour there, an hour back where I could pick something that I wanted to learn about. And there's plenty of podcasts, there's plenty of YouTube channels, there's plenty of audio books that I could pop in. And so, there's books like this one right here, African American Latinx History of the United States. Listen to Asada.
Oh, wait,
See,
wait, slow down, slow down.
yeah,
Go back, okay? Because
yeah,
that
yeah.
first one, I don't think I ever heard of that. African American and Latinx?
Yeah, this one right here, African American and Latinx History of the United States by Paul Ortiz.
Okay.
And this is how big of a nerd I am, all right? When I read a book, if I'm really into it, normally I'll mark it up. This one I listened to in an audiobook, but I had a Google Doc I made as I was listening to it, and I added like notes and hyperlinks to dig into different things that were mentioned in here, speeches and documents, and that doc turned out like 45 pages long, right? So I'm like, okay, there's a lot in here. And again, how many people get to read a book like this? You know, how many people even know books like this exist?
Yeah.
Uh, and so yeah, like learning about this again, I read Asada, I got my stack of books back here, and like learning from their experiences and being introduced to certain vocabulary.
Mhm.
I was talking to somebody the other day about how if you live in the United States, you are like a fish in water who doesn't know what water is. You're you're living under capitalism, but you can't define what capitalism is, like in simple terms. Most people think capitalism means I spend money, I get things, I work and I earn money. Like that's capitalism. No, there's a lot more to it, right? The means of production, the people who own, the people who are laboring, right? When you hear about things like systemic inequality, that you need somebody who understands this in a concrete way to help you parse through that. If you don't have that, then you're just kind of walking through life accepting whatever narratives are being presented to you.
Mm.
So I think that for me really helped just to be open-minded enough to listen to those kinds of stories and listen to those narratives and not be immediately repulsed. I know people where if you said the word socialism or communism, they're running out the room. You
Yeah.
know, they think that's like a what does Asada say? Like it's a man in a trench coat. You know what I'm saying? So those are the I'd say that's what really helped me is I wasn't afraid to learn about these things, and also as a man, coming from an immigrant community and living side by side with people who are struggling under capitalism, it was very personal to me, right? Like, I'm not just learning about it because I'm curious and I wanna be, this heady dude who knows all these things. No, it's a matter of survival for me and my people to know this stuff.
Man, let's backtrack a little bit too. I want to reflect on the good and bad words you just said according to American society, man. You know, you said capitalism, that's a good word in America. You said socialism and communism. Ooh, I don't know, but we might get flagged. You said that and you said Palestinian liberation, brother.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you know, you know what's
Mhm.
interesting about this? When I was teaching, bro, I don't understand how it became a thing, but my students knew by the time they got to me in high school, so maybe they were juniors, 16, 17, they knew in their mind that they were supposed to believe that socialism was evil already. I don't know how much they paid attention to US history, world history before me or in middle school. Most kids ain't really caring about that subject, but they knew when they got to me that they were supposed to detest it. And when I would ask them about different things about our society, even the fact that they go to a public school, right? They couldn't even really explain why. I would find myself, and I don't say playing the angel's advocate. This is in the 2010s. We talking about, the fight for increasing the minimum wage to 15. This is, at this
Yeah.
point, crazy, bro. 15 maybe years ago. Some places don't even have that. But I would like, I'm in conversation with my students and they adamantly believe that that was insane, right? I think the best way to compare it now would probably be maybe $25. I don't know, just for inflation. That's going up all the time. But they would be like, oh, and these are kids. That's an entry
Mhm.
level job. They don't deserve that money. They not doing it like I'm thinking like this is $1 billion company, y'all. You're telling me that $1 billion company, people who are working 40 plus hours a week do not deserve a place that you all go for lunch all the time. You expect good service from. You're telling me those people who do more work than the person who owns the company doesn't deserve to be able to survive? Or like a Walmart, and they invest in, you know, um, ensuring that their employees can remain on welfare so they don't have to pay them more. And it's interesting how this indoctrinate American indoctrination, as Cheryl put in the chat, is something that I don't think we're aware that it doesn't just happen in the class. So is what I'm really trying to say. We think sometimes, and it probably, of course, you got some educators who will put in some sly things when they're teaching. Definitely will assert that they're teaching from a neutral perspective, but the neutral perspective here is the upliftment and maintenance of imperialism, colonialism, so-called white supremacy. You know what I mean? So they're getting it from there. They're getting it from movies and so on and so forth. So how would you explain to someone what the difference is between these capitalism, socialism, communism? How would you help somebody better understand this and why they shouldn't think the latter two are bad words?
Woo. Alright. First off, I always tell people, please read. Please read, as the Marx is somebody that people again have been conditioned to fear. If you hear Marxist, if you hear communist, if you hear socialist, they think this person's anti-American and is a threat to our national security. And the other thing I wanted to just highlight, sorry if I keep flashing books, is because I feel like
No,
I
that's
want to share them
important.
out.
No, no,
When you
my only thing is when you flash it, hold it for a little bit so we
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
get
Well, you mentioned about how some educators like to pretend they're neutral. Paulo Freire in the Pedagogy of the Oppressed lets us know there's no such thing as a neutral education. You're either conforming people, you're either educating people to conform to the society or to challenge that society, right? And when it comes to, I think, capitalism, communism, socialism, that's a obviously there's like
Yeah,
college courses on this whole thing.
yeah.
But I would summarize it in that capitalism focuses on profits over people,
Mhm,
where the people who have all this capital, these resources, will use those resources to create the conditions so that they can extract even more resources and even more capital. And the people who are earning a wage, the people who are working underneath these people, are exploited in a way where they don't want them to join. They don't want to balance the scales, because if the scales are balanced, I stop growing. It's the endless pursuit of profit,
mhm.
right? And that's how you get someone like Elon Musk, who's going to be the first trillionaire, uh, like on paper, right? And I tell people, like, do you know what a $1 trillion looks like? There's around 350 million people living in this country, in the United States. And if Elon Musk, as a trillionaire, were to decide to give everybody $2,000 overnight, he'd still have $650 billion. All right, like, it's a ridiculous amount of money.
Man.
And so that's what capitalism creates. And not only that, capitalism depends on the exploitation of not just people here in the US who are working, at Walmart or McDonald's, but people in the third world.
Mhm,
Like the devices that we're using right now, the
mhm,
laptops and the phones, those are only possible because of people living in the Congo who are being exploited to extract those mineral resources that are then used to
mhm,
create these products.
mhm,
And capitalism says that's a casualty. That's just a byproduct of the business.
mhm,
Socialism and communism, in a nutshell, I would say, recognize the basic humanity of all people and the need for us to provide for the basic needs of all people. And people see this as like a utopian thing, but really it's just an egalitarian way of living, right? Indigenous communities in Latin America, in North America, in Africa operated on egalitarian principles. But once you operate under this hierarchy, once you have people who are starting to climb up this ladder and using that position to exploit people at the bottom, that egalitarianism collapses.
mhm,
Um, I think like basic things, you see like Mamdani in New York, running as a democratic socialist. And people were trying to fearmonger about that. We don't want socialism here. We don't want communism here. What's he fighting for? He wants free buses for everybody. He wants childcare for working families. And I want to be clear, that itself is not even socialism, right? That's not communism.
mhm.
That's just using the resources of the people, tax dollars, to provide for the needs of the people on a very minuscule level,
Yeah,
childcare and transportation. If
right.
you were to have full on socialism, it would be creating conditions where everybody not only has transportation and childcare, but you have housing, you have healthcare, you have a job that actually pays you a decent wage where you're not struggling. And again, there's like a whole debate on, oh, we tried it here and it didn't work and this and that. If people want to get into that, that's its own more nuanced conversation. But
Yeah.
let's shell, that's how I would summarize it.
Yeah, for sure, and I think too, like, I think you said it very succinctly, like, I mean, capitalism, it briefly, of course, is, profit over people by any means. Like you literally, I would always describe like when I break down what racism and sexism, like, it's that thing at the most extreme level. You know what I'm saying? Like capital in itself is an evil. Like we have social capital. We bring value to different things. But when you add the ism, you prioritize that over every single thing, not the
Mhm.
person. We're social beings. Socialism, we prioritize people. And it's interesting to me because when we raise children at a very young age to we and to me in many ways like we have these socialist ideals we want to give them and like don't when you're playing in the sandbox kind of how I think of it like you don't hog all the toys, share the toys, but make sure everybody got something. You have the kids party, everybody make sure you got your birthday cake, your pizza, all these types of things, and in the class and make sure everybody got what they supposed to have and things like that. But then you get to a certain point leave high school or whatever it is. It's kind of, it was every man for themselves. And we're made to think that if you live in poverty economically, then that is that's that is a depiction of who you are as a person.
Yeah, it's a
Like you didn't
character.
it's a character flaw. That's what
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
character flaw. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't try hard enough. You need to work harder. Like, brother, if we talk about our histories collectively of the people who we descend from, nobody has worked harder on this landmass, right? So
yeah.
it's not about that, right? You it's not
Well,
so
I want to speak on that too. Something there's this phrase that people who are critical of socialism, and I wanted to add to, I think on a basic level, people say socialism is essentially workers owning the means of production. Meaning, if there is a factory, if there is a some kind of operation where there are profits that are being extracted, the workers who are creating that profit should decide how that profit gets allocated and spread, as opposed to a CEO who that gets to take all those coins and pass out whatever coins they want to pass out, right?
right.
But there's a phrase that you often hear from critics of socialist and communist ideas. They say, socialism is great in theory until you run out of other people's money. And then my response to that is, how'd they get that money? You know, how did George Washington, first president of the U.S., become one of the richest men in the country? Was it because he just worked real hard,
Come on.
bootstrap? No, his family owned enslaved people, and so if those people who were enslaved had actually been compensated for the labor of building this country, they wouldn't have Washington wouldn't have been as rich and powdered wigged as he was. So I just wanted to add that bit.
No, he'd be poor.
Mhm.
I'm glad you said that. George Washington, all of them, Thomas Jefferson, they would literally be impoverished if we were to equate it based on work ethic. And it's funny because when people will criticize socialism and things like that, and they will say, "Oh, it didn't work out here, it didn't work out," like, is capitalism working out here? And we have to always understand that we're talking about human beings still. We're still talking about people operate, and there has to never been like a perfect representation of that. And there's also been American intervention in anybody who's trying to do things the right way. But we understand here, like, well, capitalism only works good for those who are benefiting from the extraction of that labor, who benefit from the systemic poverty and inequity. So that's something that still has to be resolved. But until people are able to not believe that that's a bad word, then they'll continue, I think, in my mind, to like advocate for things and people and parties that are completely the complete antithesis of where we want to be. Like, it's funny because if you were to introduce somebody to these concepts and not use the words, most people would think, "Oh yeah, like kids." I mean, I gotta say most, because not all. We know there's some crazy folks, man. Like, but like kids shouldn't starve. You know what I mean? Like, and if I believe kids shouldn't starve, I don't believe adults should starve. Like, I don't believe that the grocery store should ask me if I want to donate. I think there should already be enough for everybody. When I'm checking out, like
Mhm.
nonprofit shouldn't exist. You know what I mean? Like we live in a society where we really want to work towards that not having to be a thing. Like we nonprofits are doing the work that the government should, and it's so much work that it's overwhelming because they keep working against the work that nonprofits who are truly committed are actually trying to do, man. So
Yeah, it's Band-Aid solutions on a thing.
for sure,
Mhm.
for sure. So what I want to kind of close this conversation as we start to wind down to is this idea of community political education. And one of the things I see that you are passionate about, like me, is local politics, man. And I think that whenever, just in anything in life, whenever I get so frustrated at everything that's outside, I have to always, tell myself, there's only so much I can do right now. I can only do the next thing. I can't do it all, right? And these issues, of course, are best solved in community. And how do you build community? It's at a grassroots level. And I'll tell people, Dr. King, when he's from Atlanta. He goes to these different places because they already have movements going. He just had the bullhorn. He went to Montgomery. These movements existed. Selma, the movements existed, man. So I think a lot of us have to think about, you know, why is it that speaking for where I am in the Chicago area, we can get maybe 70, 75, maybe 80% sometimes people voting in federal elections. But then on a local level, if it's just local politics, no federal attachment, we're getting 10, we're getting 20%. So why do you think that it's important for us to maybe start at a grassroots level? And do you have any recommendations for how we begin, like where we are right now for the people that are watching? How do we galvanize people locally?
Yeah. The way that I got into politics, like I mentioned before, was it was on national politics, right? So I was talking about the Bernie Sanders campaign. And part of the reason that I fell into the national was because he was fighting for things and advocating for things that I felt everybody deserved, right? Universal healthcare, education, all these things. What I realized in that as I'm knocking on doors, talking to people, is that there are a lot of people in our community who agree with these principles, but they're waiting for somebody to introduce themselves and to open the door for them to say, "Come this way if you want to fight for that." But elections for president are only every 4 years, and the repercussions of that, everybody feels it. But there's more that you can do because if you're just limiting your activities to voting for president, then you're wasting so much potential. What I learned in 2020, we were fighting for, again, we were marching for Black Lives Matter, and the conversation around then was defund the police and abolish the police. And there were people in our community here in Santana where the police department was getting a ridiculous amount of the discretionary budget, right? So the city has a set amount of money that they could spend on wherever it is that they feel they need to invest it. And because so many people on the city council were receiving contributions and donations from our local police officers association, when it came time to contract negotiations, they were like, here you go. You get all the money. And when we saw that, when we learned about that, again, plugging in that national conversation of police reform and abolition of these carceral systems, we recognized that we could take those funds and invest it in youth programming and housing and education and all these other things that actually address those root causes of crime. And in that process, I met some local people who were running for city council. And so we had people with a progressive mindset. They weren't just fighting to hold this police officers association accountable, but they were fighting for things like rent control, fighting for investment in youth programs. And so knocking on doors for them helped to bring the local conversation to life, right? Now you have people who aren't just talking about, is it going to be Trump, Clinton, Bernie? It's who's the person who's representing your block? And what park do you want to see built next? And how much money do you want to see going to your library so that you can take your kids to go hang out there? I feel like when you are so caught up in the national conversation, you can feel powerless. You can feel helpless because it really is hard to make a difference on a national level. But on the local level, you have a significant impact. When I go to council meetings and you see people giving public comment, it's usually like the same 20, 30 people coming up to the stand. In our city, there's 300,000 people. And so imagine what could happen if uh, thousands of people are showing up to speak on this item or that item. I remember last year during the ICE raids, they were really, our city is a sanctuary city. We have 78% Latinos here in the city, and about 40% of them are foreign born. And so we were getting hit by ICE real hard. And you had the National Guard coming down. And what ended up happening is our mayor here in the city was basically throwing her hands up, saying, there's nothing we could do. It's DC, it's a federal issue. The best we can do is keep our head down and hope that they don't come for our budget. And the people here weren't having that. Like they're coming for our neighbors, they're coming for our family members. And so we organized, it was us and a bunch of different organizations and coalitions calling for people to come and speak at the city council meeting. And we had over 130 people sign up to speak. A lot of people who had never been to a council meeting before. 130 people coming to speak saying, you as our mayor need to do better. We're not going to accept you just hanging your head down and saying, don't look at us over here. And within a month, she went from nothing we could do to posting videos on social media every day saying, here's what we're doing to help. Well, here's how we're putting funds to help these families that are being impacted. Here's how we're working with our local school district to make sure that families are safe.
Mm,
But that wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have happened if she didn't feel that pressure from the people.
mm.
So, that's just one example. I got tons of different examples that we could point to just in local organizing work. But the most important thing I tell people is do not underestimate the influence that you have on a local level to influence the people around you.
Yeah, man, that's powerful because even with that said, to me, what you all exhibited, this is how like national movements are birthed from local politics. That's just how it happens, right? I remember even in 2020, because that was a watershed moment for a lot of people. Whenever I would come across stories of videos of black men being lynched and black women being lynched by police, whether it was in 2020 or 2016, you feel overwhelmed. And one of the things I started to do was, well, of course, I can't just drive to Ferguson right now. I can't just go to Minnesota right now. But I live in a town about 45 minutes from Chicago. I know Chicago has some corrupt officers, a corrupt system. But what about where I am in Joliet? So I started doing some, Google research, and I started coming across articles of black men on the police force filing federal lawsuits, alleged discrimination on their police force, right? I come across these cases. I start posting stories. I think for me too in 2017, with that frustration, I decided to go to a city council meeting. And brother, like, I'm in a town of like 150,000 people. I may have been the only person that commented that day. I mean, and my comment was about the lack of black businesses. Like they weren't a lot of black owned businesses, and I was concerned. And I posted that clip, and did pretty good locally. Then I started doing more research about the police, and I started coming to the meeting to speak out about that. And I had people sharing things with me, and I started to see like as above, so below, as people say, right? Like if it happened in DC, if it happened in Minnesota, Chicago, it's probably happening where you are too. Like there's no difference in how these systems operate. We have these lines here that we think actually separate us between, what I'm saying, California and Nevada and Illinois and Iowa, Indiana. But like, nah, brother, it's the same thing. And it's not gonna change federally until we impose our will as people locally. I can give you an example on the opposite end that we're trying to work through now. So I'm not sure if you saw any of my posts about this because I've been off IG, but like there was an AI data center that was trying to come to Joliet, right? In Illinois, they're popping up everywhere in Illinois. This was going to be an 800-acre data center, bruh. We talking, people say about the size of Central Park, right? And this is a town of 150,000 people. Okay, they've expanded a lot in this area, but it's still like we know the economic cost of this. We know the environmental cost of what this can be. So I had some people tell me about this, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. Somebody started a petition out here, got a lot of signatures. People started going to all of these meetings. There was word that people really felt the council was going to approve it. Like, and the thing I love about local politics too is, at least out here, is there is no label in local politics for our city. So you just run, and people have to gauge who you are based on how they see you respond to things. So we step outside of those labels. I'm seeing people from all walks of life going to these city council meetings, man. And the last one, right before, matter of fact, the day they were supposed to vote on whether to have it or not, the meeting lasted 7 hours. It didn't end, I think, until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And because that next day was a local election day, they had to postpone the vote, I think, until Thursday. Now, regardless of all of that, these city council members, it was an 8-to-1 vote, including the mayor, still decided to accept this. So now, when you talk of local politics, the people have a decision to make now because you did what you were supposed to do, right? For one, maybe you didn't know this person in power was that way, but that's an issue too because only about 10% of people actually voted for some of these people. It's a low turnout, right? But our next local election isn't for a year. So now the test is, are people going to feel that same frustration? And the test for organizers is, can you organize people who felt that way, the hundreds of people who commented, and mobilize around this issue so that they don't fall back into complacency? One of the things I saw, and I want to kind of ask you this too, because I
Yeah.
think it's important for us to provide tangible, because you already provided one. Maybe we can get two more. Like, what are some tangible solutions outside of just voting? Because too often we tell people like, hey, this could have been reduced if you just voted. That's not really the case in America on a federal level, right? But we know that voting makes a difference, especially locally. But we know like this thing is what it is. So in between those every 2 years, in between those every 4 years, outside of voting locally, what else can we do? And there's one thing I want to propose to people that I saw. There is a small suburban town outside of Milwaukee. I came across this article today. I think it's called, I don't want to butcher it. It's Port something. They are the first suburb, the first town in the country to vote against the future construction of AI data centers because they put a referendum on the ballot that was just approved this past Tuesday. The first in the country. I'm assuming I'm sorry, that town is a small town in America, north of Milwaukee, is probably majority white, right? I think what we're going to find though is, regardless of our racial background, ethnic background, so-called political parties and whatever, we can agree on this for the most part. This is not what a lot of Americans who live here really want. You can put, like, we think you got to run for office. You don't have to. You can put a referendum. then, right? I'm also going to propose too, like a referendum will require petitions. We got to get out in the streets. One of the things I've learned as a so-called content creator is sometimes I myself put too much in how a video is performing or how viral something is without understanding that that doesn't have a lot of relevance to the real world political impact of things because it's all spread out too. If I have a video that has 1 million views and it's all spread out across this country, I'm not mobilizing anybody. We got to get out and actually talk to people, meet people, talk to your neighbors, go to the place where the foot traffic is, engage people. The best way to get organized is to join an organization that shares your views or to start it if it doesn't exist.
Mhm. Yeah, there was a Kwame speech, Kwame Ture, he was talking about how in the age of, like, media and, translated to today with social media, that people put so much influence on the power that media has, and they say, like, "If I don't have a microphone, if there's not a camera on me, then what can I do?" But like you said, I can make a video that gets 100,000, 200,000 views, and if they're spread out and it's a bunch of people who I don't know on a personal level, maybe it'll move them. Maybe they'll be influenced to take some kind of action based on that content. But more likely than not, it's just gonna be something that they swipe up on, bookmark it for later. But if I talk to the person living next door to me, if I'm a student and I start talking to my classmates, if I work at a Starbucks and I start talking to my coworkers about what we actually deserve as workers, that's gonna have a much more significant impact because I'm looking at you eye to eye. I'm shoulder to shoulder with you, and we can actually build something right there.
Mhm.
I think that would be the number one thing, like you said. If you're not a part of an organization, see what you can do to get involved in local organizations that are active in your community. And that doesn't mean necessarily you have to sign up, become a dues paying member. Ideally, that's the most commitment that we want people to step into. But even if it's just you see this organization is doing good work and you want to lend a hand, go learn what you can from them. And if you don't see something that's being done, build it. Here locally, there's a organization that was made by some college youth and um, their focus was on getting young people involved, high school aged youth involved. And so they called it Santa Ana Youth Vote. And what they do is they go into the local high schools and they talk to them about the electoral process and who's in charge of running this city. And if you actually want to make an impact, what does that look like? And also, you can pre register. If you're 16, 17 years old, we'll get you signed up. And then when you're 18, boom, you're ready to go. So, like, those are the kind of avenues that we can take. I think what I try to do on a local level is really focused on the educational aspect. Like, I take what I do online, and my lady Leslie and I every now and then will host events at the park. We call them Sana Sana Sundays, where we meet up at the park and we'll invite people. Sometimes you get 10 people, sometimes you get 50 people. And we'll just pick about we'll talk about whatever topic is on people's minds. So, last year we were talking about ICE. 2 years ago, we were talking about Palestine. More recently, right now, we're looking to see how we can talk about in the Latino community the revelations about Cesar Chavez are causing a lot of commotion in the activist and organizing community. It's causing a lot of rupture, and so we're trying to see what can we do to have a conversation that is constructive, so that people aren't falling apart, and then we're even more demobilized, even more disorganized moving forward. But we can actually come around these values that we want to share collectively. So those are some ideas, but yeah, well, I don't know what else comes up for you then.
No, that's dope, man. Now, can you say that again? You say it's Sunday.
Oh, we call it Sana Sana Sunday. So in Spanish, there's that phrase Sana Sana colita de rana, si no sana hoy, sanará mañana. Basically means heal, heal. Sana Sana means to heal. And so we formed this collective. My partner and I, we call it Sana Sana Santana. For the name of our city is Santana,
I
and
love
that's
it.
our goal. Yeah, we wanna help the community to heal, and that involves having these difficult conversations. That involves political education. That involves the arts. Involves all that.
I mean, I think what we have and what we've put up here is, we need to be actively going to city council meetings. That's one. And I think one of the things I propose to people, I admittedly, it's difficult now, having kids who are very involved and having
Mm.
a inconsistent work schedule to make those meetings. You can also tune in a lot of places like in my city, it's streamed live. I think I would also encourage people if you are in a political organization, then maybe you should make it the responsibility of certain people to go. Maybe y'all kind of switch off, go to a meeting. And again, we're talking city council, we're talking school board. That's very important too. Park district board, county. a lot of these things I've learned on the fly living here because Chicago is so big. You know, everything, again, just like that American complex, you think everything is about that big city. You know about the alderman, you know about the mayor. But once you live in like a medium sized city or whatever, you start to understand all the different levels. We have a township, we have this, we have that. I think that beyond going to these meetings, you already said another point. We need to start having conversations in person. And I understand that we have a lot with what we, social media. People can go live like we're doing at any time. You can have a video go viral at any time, especially on TikTok. But the thought I was having is if you are able to get 500 signatures for something or to sign up 500 people or meet 500 people, that's worth more than
Mhm.
50,000 views on any of these apps.
Yeah,
You
and,
gotta
you know, I'll say too, like, here in our city, because we talk so much about local politics, I do get people, I'll be, like, at my son's school, and some parents will be like, "I follow you." Or we'll be at the grocery store, and they'll be like, "Oh, I like that video you made." And, it's nice to get that recognition, to see that people are
Yeah,
paying, but I always take that step and be like, "Okay, cool. I'm glad that you're paying attention. Are you registered? Are you involved? Are you going to the meeting?" Right? We don't need just likes and comments on the videos. We need you going out and talking to people.
yes, indeed. And I think that's another point too. We were talking about this before we went live. For those who are posting things online, I'm highly recommended. And again, none of these apps are our friends. I think that's important to understand. We're renting this space. For those who've been following me, I've been kicked off of IG for 3 months now, but we also have to utilize them as tools. These are tools of mass communication, not to organize, right? It's to communicate something, to communicate the work that's already being done, or maybe the work you want to start doing, but the work has to happen with us. If you are starting to want to post things online about where you are, TikTok now, I would say since they have had switched ownership, my For You page has significantly shifted to be more local than before. I'm seeing people post about places I've been, places I frequent, issues that matter to me. Now, by and large, I'm seeing way more, of course, food content creators in my area. That's cool too. But I'm just saying that to say, like, if you think about bang for your buck for a social media post, TikTok's gonna probably be the best one if you're just getting started because anybody can go viral. You might have I've clicked on people's stuff. They've had a video that got 5 million and they got 4 followers, you know? So like that type of approach can work. You could geotag it where you are if you feel comfortable doing that. That can allow you to connect with people. But remember, everything we post on here is being monitored, is being watched. So be very careful about how you handle that. So we've talked about going to these meetings. We've talked about creating community spaces. We have to reinvigorate that third space again. We have all these fancy titles, but that's just what we normally did before social media, going out with friends, getting together. I got a video coming out soon talking about like the drop and decline of social clubs, man. Particularly, I mean, in all of America, but I got my videos particularly about the African American community here. But they had a club for everything back in the day, man. Every interest, like the book club, it wasn't just political stuff. It was just we bowling, the bowling club.
Yeah.
A matter of fact, a documentary I'm gonna recommend folks watch too. I saw it on Netflix. It was called Join or Die, and it was based on this book by a guy who wrote a book called Bowling Alone, talking about how the drop in social clubs was consistent with just a drop in civic participation across the country. So we might feel like we have all this technology. Why aren't things getting better? But it's because we have utilized these devices to isolate ourselves. It started with the television and it multiplied with the cell phone. So by any means, y'all, we got to find a way because I think most people will find in their local politics that the percentage of people voting is drastically different and significantly lower than it is for federal elections. That is
Mhm.
overtly marketed to us, but most of us aren't able to name our council members like we should be able to. Um, and I think another thing too is referendums. You can put referendums on the ballot. You don't have to run for office, but also too, like like mold your kids, mold those kids, and I would say recruit the kids you see that have that potential to get involved locally in things. We don't always have to be, highlighting that kid because he's tall and saying he should play this sport or play that sport.
Mhm.
Look at those kids who are in speech and the debate and all these other things and say, I see something in you. You should come to this meeting with me. You should, I would tell my students, man, y'all about to be 18, run for school board. You could be the boss soon as you graduate.
Yeah. So there's a workshop that I run called Teach Them Young, and it's all about how to talk to young people, whether they're 5 years old or 18 years old, about the history of young people uh, getting involved in social justice movements. Something we caution in that is you don't want to overburden or overwhelm young people, and you also want to be mindful of, like, I know that when I got involved in this stuff, I studied COINTELPRO, I studied the political repression that people in these spaces face. And so
Mm,
you wanna be mindful of that too,
mm,
because it can take a toll on on your psyche, on your spirit to be involved in this work. And if you're just walking people through that door without prepping them for what's to come, then we see burnout. We see people just checking out completely and saying, I'm all out. I can't do this anymore. And you see people walking in unprepared
mm,
for, like you said, those narrative sort of, games that are gonna be played where
mm.
they're involved in the political process, but you didn't prep them to see through this charade that gets presented, and now they're getting co-opted, right? So I think there's all that we have to consider when we talk about getting young people involved.
I think that's a whole nother conversation we need to have, man. I'm actually doing I'm speaking on a panel this upcoming weekend about how to talk to our kids about difficult conversations like this, slavery, the war, and just the political landscape in general. So I'll be interested to talk to you about that in the future, man, because I think for one, we want to get people who, if you are doing this locally, get people galvanized to want to attend these things. But then also, I think that, I mean, for anybody in this country that is conscious of these things and you have children, you grapple with that daily. Like how do I present this? How much do I talk to them about this? And what do I say? And then at what age should I introduce certain things? So that's a very important conversation. So man, as we get ready to leave, like let the folks know if you got anything coming up or if like where can we find you moving forward so we can stay in touch with you.
Thank you, brother. So I just recently started Substack. Like, I haven't posted too much content on here, but I'm hoping to expand. So if you're not following me yet, you can check me out here. Uh, my primary work is on Instagram. So if you want to see the kind of content that I make, you can find me at fernando.deveras. And yeah, you'll see I've been talking about all kinds of things there. And then also, I want to just give a shout out to my partner, Leslie Priscilla, her organization, Latinx Parenting. We work side by side. She created a lot of the foundational programming, and then I came in to create conversations for men, for dads, for youth. So check out Latinx Parenting. She just wrote her first book. It's called Chancla. I don't know if I got it here. It's here somewhere. But yeah, so check her work out as well. And yeah, that's it.
I love it, man. I'm glad we was able to have this conversation, brother. We definitely got to do it again, man.
Mhm.
I feel like whenever I talk to people now, I'm always saying there's so much going on because it is. So I think the best way to close this is for everybody watching, just pick one thing. It's overwhelming, but just pick one thing you want to do. And the best way to approach that is to start locally, even if it's just starting a conversation with a friend you never talked about politics with, or maybe even a stranger striking up a conversation at a local coffee shop, library, something. We can like this didn't happen through one individual, so we can't get out of this alone. We get through this together in community. So thank y'all for tuning in, and I'll see y'all next time.
Mhm.